So, birth stories. Love them or hate them. As soon as you get pregnant, people will start sharing their birth stories with you. And I also think that once you have a birth story of your own to share, they're kind of addictive. It's such a big life-changing moment that you go through. And I think people like sharing them, and people do like hearing them, although maybe not the scary ones when you're about to have a baby of your own. Today, I thought that I would share my 3 birth stories kind of in a nutshell. And compare them, because they were very different, and I think that's the thing that's most exciting about hearing people's birth stories, is they are as different and as varied as the babies that they give us at the end. I don't think any 2 birth stories are ever quite the same, and I kind of think that's the nice thing about it. You know, it's one of nature's great big surprises, is the fact that they aren't ever the same. My first birth with my son, I went into that one, I guess, as possibly most naive first time parents do, thinking that it was going to be a breeze. Ironically, I obviously knew it was going to be painful, and I'd listened to all those parts of the stories, but I spent most of the 9 months having my entire family tell me that all the women in my family basically sneeze babies out, and we have really, really quick labours in our family, and you'll be in and out and it will be no trouble. And I also thought that I'm quite a calm person when it comes to pain, and I don't tend to make a fuss about stuff, and I just thought that was going to stand me in really good stead, and I was going to have this amazing pain threshold, I was going to have this really calm labour. I was hardly going to have any pain relief, and yeah, I was going to breathe this baby out. That wasn't really what happened. I had more than 30 hours of labour from my waters breaking to him actually being born. He was in back-to-back position, so I was in pain for a lot of that. The contractions were very intense for a lot of that, as my body was basically trying to turn him into a better position. And I also found that some of the midwives I encountered in my first labour, or one particular midwife, wasn't particularly sympathetic, and I think that she maybe thought I was being a bit of an overdramatic first time mother, and just didn't seem to get that I wasn't making a fuss for the sake of it, and I was really in quite a lot of pain. So basically I had 24 hours of going to and from the hospital, going to hospital, being sent home because I was only 2 centimetres, going back to the hospital, being sent home again. Things just didn't really progress very quickly for the first 24 hours, but because my waters had then gone, you start being at risk for infection. I think my waters went at 6 o'clock in the morning. At midnight that night, so not quite the 24 hours later, but then I hit active labour at 4 centimetres, and they let me stay at the midwife-led unit to sort of be monitored and potentially give birth, but nothing really happened from there. I wanted to push because I was feeling a lot of pressure, but couldn't push because I was only at 4 centimetres. So it wasn't the nicest experience. That was also where I had the not quite so nice midwife. So by the time I got to 6 o'clock in the morning, which was 24 hours after my waters had gone, we made the decision to transfer me up to the main hospital where the main labour unit was, where I could also have an epidural, because by that point I'd had enough, and I had gone from not wanting really any pain relief to wanting all the pain relief. So I had an epidural and a hormone drip to kind of speed things up a little bit, and when I got to the hospital, funnily enough, I then had a sleep for a few hours, which I think was really good for me. I felt then really rested and calmed down a lot because I had been quite panicky and quite afraid. But around about lunchtime, they started seeing decelerations in the baby's heart rate, and it wasn't picking up quite so well in between, because the contractions were coming quite thick and fast by that point. And yeah, they turned my hormone drip down to sort of try and give the baby a bit more of a break in between, but it wasn't really helping. And they checked me and I was 10 centimetres, and basically everything went really quickly from there. So it went from us just being there quite chilled with the midwife to suddenly there being a senior midwife there being a consultant, another doctor, 2 paediatricians. It suddenly got really mad really quickly, and they were like, we need to get this baby out now. I ended up with a Von 2's delivery with him because they needed him out so quickly, which obviously wasn't ideal, but fortunately he was fine. The Von 2's worked, so we didn't end up having to go to forceps or a C-section, which were talked about at the time. And yeah, what happens is kind of what happens in the movies for me that time around, in that I'd gone through this epic, long, awful labour, really painful. I was so tired, and they handed me this baby and I was euphoric. It's that whole thing of life changes in an instant, and I held that baby in my arms and I'd forgotten all of it, all that I'd been through, and within minutes I'd said to Rich, I could do this 100 times, and he looked at me like, are you mad, woman? What have you just been through and you want to do that again? But yeah, for me, that time around, all of the effort been totally worth it for how amazing I felt holding my son, my first baby, becoming a mum. I'd have gone through all of that all over again to have that feeling. So 19 months further down the line, I'd convinced my husband, yeah, we're going to do this again. Second time around, I guess I went in with more baggage, but you also go in a bit more, forewarned about how things are going to be. You know a little bit better about how painful it's going to get. You know a little bit more about how well you're going to deal with that pain. You know a little bit more about how best to support your own labour, as it were. And I definitely went in feeling like I would happily go through the 30 hours again, but knowing that probably the reality was it would be slightly quicker this time around. I knew that I wanted an epidural again because that had been the right decision, and that was basically it. What I don't think I prepared for when I went into it the second time around was, what I not so much hadn't prepared for, I'd forgotten how painful it was. So my waters again went first at home. There was meconium in the water, so we had to go straight to hospital that time, and we knew we were going to have to stay there because they were going to need to monitor the baby. And initially I felt like I was dealing with it really well, and I'd obviously turned up at hospital and said epidural as soon as I'm at 4 centimetres. And as a second time parent, the midwife's just like, that's absolutely fine, if that's what you want, that's not a problem. Nobody questioned me. But then I dealt with early labour so well that time, the midwife was saying, are you sure you're going to need that epidural? I think you're doing brilliantly. But I was hell-bent I was going to have it. But then as the pain started to ramp up, I think second time around, I knew how much worse it needed to get before the end, and I think that scared me a little bit, and I got to a point where I started to panic, and I was really afraid, and I didn't ironically feel that afraid the first time around, because I guess you don't know what you're doing the first time around, but second time around I knew what I was doing, and I knew it had to get a lot worse, and I already wasn't dealing with it very well, and I lost it really, and I was crying and apologising to Rich that I was so rubbish at having babies and so rubbish at giving birth, and why had he chosen to have his babies with me. Oh my goodness, I was a right mess. Turned out I was 4 centimetres, so they got the anaesthetist in pretty quick to administer an epidural. Around about the time he administered it though, I did start feeling those first pushing feelings, but I decided not to tell the midwife about those until I had my epidural in, which was probably a little bit naughty, because as soon as they put the epidural in, the midwife looked at me and said, Lucy, you wanted to push with that last contraction, didn't you? And I kind of fessed up, and from then on I then didn't feel any contractions, so yeah. I got what I wanted in the end, and it meant that my epidural was in, but they had to then give me an hour for her to descend down, and also for my epidural to wear off a little bit. So that's what we did, and it was a very weird time, like this weird hour just waiting for a baby to come. But yeah, I then, once that sort of hour had gone and my epidural was starting to wear off, and I could feel the pressure but not the pain, which is the ideal scenario, I guess. So I knew when to push, and I could push, but it didn't hurt to push. So it was very calm pushing to have Everly, because I felt really controlled, and I felt like a rock star after she was born, because I'd actually had to have fun twos with Dylan, and I felt like I'd been helped and somehow like hadn't done it myself. Second time around, I felt really brilliant that I'd done it myself, and she was born, and they told me she was a girl, and I just remember being really shocked, because I think I'd had it in my head for 9 months I was having another boy, and it wasn't, I was disappointed I was having a girl, but I just didn't expect a girl. And actually when she was very first born, I felt a little bit like I was cheating on Dylan when I held her. Which is, I know sounds really weird, but I had had Dylan for 19 months by that point, and I felt like I had such a strong relationship with him, and I knew him, and I was really bonded with him. And then they kind of handed me this baby, and I felt like I was supposed to instantly feel the same way about her as I felt about Dylan, and I felt really weird because I didn't. I didn't feel like I knew her, and it was difficult, I think, because it wasn't it wasn't how I expected to feel. I was really pleased that she'd arrived, and I was pleased that she was a girl, and I loved her straight away, but I wouldn't say that I felt that same euphoric, crazy in love feeling that I'd felt the first time around. I felt like I needed to get to know her a little bit, which I hadn't really expected going into it to feel like that at all. Third time around, I obviously had twice the baggage going in because I had 2 children already, was very hell-bent on having an epidural, very concerned I might not get one because everybody kept telling me, you know, this was a 3rd baby, and 3rd babies tend to come really quick. But I was really worried that I wasn't going to get one. Going in, that was my only thing really that I wanted on my birth plan, was I wanted them to leave the cord clamping a little while, and I wanted an epidural. They were my only 2 things I was worried about. 3rd time around, I obviously knew what I was having that time around, and that was partly because I wanted to preempt that weird shocked feeling that I'd had the 2nd time around. And I definitely feel like I went into that 3rd birth feeling like I knew my baby a little bit, and I felt more bonded with her and prepared, I guess. With her, my waters went, and nothing happened for a little while. We went in for a quick bit of monitoring. They sent us home, said everything was fine. I was having contractions, but I couldn't even feel them at that point. They were showing on the monitor, and they said, you can go home, not a problem. Sent me home, so I was contracting at home for a little while, all through in the night, basically, for a couple of hours in the night. So I went to bed at midnight. My waters had gone about 9, went to bed at midnight, starting to feel contractions. By about 1 o'clock, I was starting to monitor them. But where with the previous 2, I'd really wanted to be in hospital at the first possible opportunity. 3rd time around, I felt really calm at home, and I felt like I was in this bubble, and me and my girl, we were doing this thing, and we were gonna get through this, and it felt like we were the only people awake in the world, and it was a really nice time. Around about 3 o'clock, I woke Rich up. With hindsight, possibly should have woken him up a little bit earlier. We rung the hospital, we told them we were coming in. I think we got to hospital at about 3:45, got in, you know, there's never any hurry. They don't ever seem to sort of hurry in hospital, because I guess they do this every day. But by the time I got to hospital, I felt like this was all going to happen quite quick. They booked me in and said I was 4 centimetres, were all sorting me out, ready to get my epidural, and then I started wanting to push. And everything went really, really quickly from then on, and I didn't get an epidural, and 1 minute we were in the car park, and then the next minute it was like, you need to start pushing now, Lucy, you're at 10 centimetres, we can see that baby's head. It was all a bit crazy. Definitely my fastest labour. I think my labour officially is recorded as being 23 minutes, which is bonkers, from 4 centimetres to when she was delivered. So yeah, that all went a lot quicker. I didn't get the epidural that I wanted, but ironically, as much as there was a moment of panic when I realised I wasn't going to get the epidural, looking back now, I basically got 3rd time around the birth that I'd wanted the 1st time around. It was just me, and I just had to do this thing. And I think Rich was more involved the 3rd time around. He kind of felt a bit like a spare part with the first 2, but the 3rd time I needed him. I was gripping onto his hand and staring into his eyes like it was something that we needed to do together, because I was in a lot of pain and quite, not afraid isn't the right word, but going through something, and I needed his support. And it was amazing, and she was born, and when she was born, it was the weirdest feeling, because it felt like I was meeting somebody I already knew. Made me feel really weird. Sorry. It's really hard to describe, and I don't know if it's because I knew that I was having a girl that time, because Rich says that he found that 3rd delivery a lot more emotional too. I found it really emotional. I felt it was really strange. Yeah, it felt like I was meeting a friend. It felt like meeting somebody that I'd waited more than 9 months to meet. It was like I was meeting somebody that I was supposed to know. It was very bizarre. And it definitely healed any wounds that I had from the 2nd time around, when I'd not had the feelings I'd expected to have after the birth. So yeah, that's my 3 births. 3 very different births, as different as the children they gave me. But the proof is in the pudding, I think, with babies. So we go through a lot to get these babies into the world. We go through a lot of pain, a lot of tears, a lot of fear, a lot of power, a lot of everything, let's be honest. You kind of get every single emotion in the time it takes, I think, to have a baby. But what you get at the end of it totally makes it worth it. And I think that's why people do it 3 times. You know, I had a very long labour the first time around, and then I had a very weird kind of emotional time after the birth the second time around, and I still went along and did it the 3rd time around, because you know, when you get to know your children and you get to know your baby, that it's 100% worth whatever you go through to get them here. So yeah, that's my birth stories, and I hope that helps anybody who's perhaps about to have their 2nd or maybe even their 3rd, and they've got some hang-ups about how things have gone, or they've got hang-ups before their 1st and you don't know how it's going to go. Just to know that it will be 100% worth it. And just because it's been one way one time doesn't mean it's going to be that way again. And you won't care. Once your baby is here, I really think, as much as you may carry a little bit of baggage from the way things go down, you won't care what it took to get them here, because you will have your baby, or in my lucky case, 3 beautiful children that show you every day that it was absolutely worth it. So if you enjoyed that video, give me a like. Leave me a comment. Let me know if my births were similar to your births or completely different to your births. I'd love to hear how you got on. And also keep an eye on this channel, because there's going to be a video very soon where I'm going to get Rich to talk about how he felt about the births. So that's definitely one not to miss. Anyway, I will see you for my next video, and thanks for watching. Bye!